This happened when I was in first grade, so I was fairly young. At the time, I went to a school that was about an hour away from my parents' house, and with the unpredictable insane city traffic, sometimes my mom was late to pick me up. It was usually just a few minutes, but being young, I would absolutely lose my shit and think that I was being abandoned. So one day, school let out and I waited for my mom to come get me. The minutes seemed to be wearing on and most of the kids were already gone. Every kid I saw leave with their parent made me feel more alone and more anxious. I felt like I was on the verge of tears. My nana lived just a few streets away from the school, and sometimes we'd go over there after I got out for some food, and so my mom and her could catch up. I remembered how close her house seemed the last time we walked over there together. I was pretty sure I knew the way, and the idea of being saved and tucked up with her instead of waiting alone in the schoolyard was just too tempting. I decided to make the walk over there by myself, and then call my mom's cell phone from my nana's house and let her know to come there instead. Yes, perfect plan, I thought. I mapped out the route in my head and started walking over there. There were usually a lot of people on these smaller streets that led to her house, but this afternoon, they all seemed to be quite deserted. I felt even more alone now, and my plan seemed less and less perfect by the second. I was about halfway there when I walked past this row of houses. One of the houses had its door opened and this old man was sitting on his porch. When he saw me, he stood up and called over, waving to me in a "come here" motion. I just stood there and watched him. I don't remember much about the way he looked except that he was really dark-skinned, which most people were since this happened in the tropics. But he looked even darker under the shade of this porch, and he had really slivery white hair which created a strange contrast. The parts of his eyes, which should have been white, were yellow, like he had some kind of liver disease or something. He was wearing an ill-fitting in-shirt or vest that was also yellowing and rolled up on his potbelly. He just looked creepy, and standing in the dark hallway of this front door made him look even more just not someone you want to be around. He seemed to get impatient that I wasn't listening to him, and he held out some candy, a lollipop I think. This time he spoke. "Where are you going, young one? Why don't you come in for some tea?" I told him that I was going to my nana's house, but he just wouldn't let it go. "Oh, I know your nana. She would want you to come inside for some tea." He turned to go inside as if he expected me to follow him. The whole situation was getting a bit much for me, and I could feel like if I continued this conversation, I was likely to burst into tears. So instead, I just booked it out of there and ran the rest of the way to my nana's house. I can't remember if I said no or anything else to him before I did. Luckily, my 6-year-old cardiovascular system was nearly brand new, and I reached her house in no time, and I didn't look behind me to see if he was following. I remember buzzing my nana's door several times until she opened the door, surprised to see little old me there by myself. I told her about how my mom was late and how I didn't want to wait there by myself anymore. The tears I had been holding in the whole time came rushing out, but like a good grandmother, she just consoled me until I felt better. All the dessert and food she piled me with definitely helped too. We called my mom, who was waiting at the school by now, quite worried. I later found out that she was literally a minute or two away when I had left, and I really should have just stayed put. Mom still got a scolding from Nana for being too late. I didn't want to get into more trouble for walking away by myself, and also, until I became an adult, I hadn't considered that he might have been a pedophile. I just thought he was a creepy looking guy that wanted company, and I was just a scared, upset kid. But now, I'm super glad that I didn't go inside or talk to him longer. No one knew where I was, and they would have never thought to come looking there. I often wonder now if he lived near the school on purpose, and whether his ploy had worked on other kids. I grew up in a small Asian country and lived in the suburb. Our town was pretty safe, so we always walked to school and took the bus to other after-school lessons alone. I started taking buses alone since I was 8. This happened during first year of junior high. I had a strict and somewhat crazy teacher that required us to be at school for extra study time by 7 a.m. instead of the regular start time of 7:30. My older sisters went to the same school, but they were often late, so I would walk to school alone basically every morning. I started seeing this old man that would be lingering around a street corner on my way to school. I was taught to be polite to the elders, so I would nod and say good morning. Usually he would wave and say good morning back. Then as time went by, he started to make small conversations. I was quite naive back then, so whatever he asked I answered. Like what year I was in, how I liked, disliked school, friends, etc. I knew enough not to tell him exactly where I lived though. One morning, the owner of a nearby breakfast stand called out to me and told me that she'd noticed the old man stopping me for conversations. "Be careful, he's weird," she said. I thanked her and kept going. A few days later I saw him again. This time he reached out and grabbed my arm and pulled me closer to him. As skinny and short as he was surprisingly strong. I couldn't shake his hand off. His face was suddenly so close to mine. I could smell his foul breath. "Give me a smooch," he said. Oh my god, what the fuck is happening? Was all I could scream internally. I used all of my strength to pull back and screamed, "No, get away from me," and ran off. I heard shouting as I passed the breakfast stand, but it didn't stop nor look back. I ran all the way to school. For the rest of the week, I walked a slightly different route, which added 5 minutes to the walk. By the following week, I felt that it should be okay to take the old route, so I did, so I could sleep 5 extra minutes. Walking with my guards up, I didn't see him. I said hi to the breakfast stand owner, and she asked me if I was okay. Then she told me that she and her customers saw what happened and ran him off and told him not to show his face around again. Warning: this post may be disturbing for some. Viewer discretion is advised. When I was about 8 years old, we had a gardener who came by regularly to look after our garden, as well as other people's gardens in the neighborhood. He was a good man, nothing weird about him, but he had an apprentice. Let's call him K. He was about 30, I guess, and was a bit weird looking, but nothing more. One day I was playing with a friend of mine, around the same age, and we went outside the house, I think to get a ball that had fallen or something. I don't really remember. That's when we saw K across the street. I knew him. I told my friend that he was our gardener, and he also went to the other houses, so I didn't see anything wrong with him being there. But then he started calling my name with an unusual voice, like when you talk to a little baby or a cute animal. After that, he called us over with the same voice saying, "Little kids, come over here." We approached him, and he started talking to us. He said that he had some cute little puppies in his home. He lived nearby, maybe about a block away, and asked if we wanted to come over and see them. We said that we weren't allowed, and he insisted a bit, but not very much. And it got even creepier. He asked us if we had penises. We said yes. Then he asked us if he could see them, but we said that our mothers don't let us show them. "Have you seen mine?" he asked, and proceeded to pull it out. We hadn't seen an adult one before, and this situation was really creepy, so we ran away. I didn't tell my parents anything, but luckily my friend did tell his mother, and she told mine. Of course my parents banned him from coming near us again, and even though in the beginning he kinda tried to deny everything, and of course the gardener fired him. I think my parents went to the police, but I'm not sure what happened because I was little and I didn't know how these things worked. I didn't know what a pedophile was back then. I didn't know anything like that existed. I didn't even know how the act of sex was done. 2 years ago, when I was 18 years old, I was walking down the street and saw Kay in the yard. Since he went to other houses, he also saw me and looked at me with a creepy but also stupid smile and tried to wave at me. And I wasn't a kid anymore, so I shouted, "Mind your own business or I'll beat the living shit out of you." He stopped. I am tall and strong, whereas he is a small guy, so I think he was scared now. I haven't seen him again, and I hope he is in prison or dead.